What if Plo Koon trained Anakin? This is Plo Koon. He's one of the more reasonable members of the Jedi Council. Plo is most well known for his special bond that he developed with Ahsoka, even creating the nickname Lil Soka for her, kind of like a rapper, and his positive treatment of the clones that served beneath him. Sadly, this composed Jedi Master ended up dying in a fiery blaze on Cato Neimoidia in his starfighter, betrayed by the ones that he had considered his brothers in arms. In the main timeline, we see him interact every so often with Anakin, but he doesn't have an incredible impact on Anakin's journey as a Jedi. What if he did, though? What if from the start, Plo Koon had been Anakin's master? That's the scenario we'll be exploring today, and it definitely goes on some unexpected paths. So without me taking up any more of your time, let's hop right in and discover what would happen if Plo Koon trained Anakin Skywalker. This story begins in the Jedi Temple following the death of Qui-Gon Jinn. Obi-Wan is briefing the Jedi Council on the event of Naboo, and he's letting them know of Qui-Gon's wish for Anakin to be trained. However, Obi-Wan is perceived by the entire council to be far too young to train Anakin. Despite defeating a Sith in combat, Obi-Wan was far too inexperienced to have an apprentice. For a moment, the council is backed into a corner about how to proceed. They know that someone experienced is needed to take Anakin under their wing, but all of the Jedi Masters were far too busy with their council duties. However, Plo Koon senses the potential that the boy has. Knowing that nobody else is going to step up, Plo Koon volunteers to train Anakin. The Masters on the council applaud his initiative, and they eagerly approve of this proposition. How does this shift change how the story plays out? Well, let's take a look. Plo Koon takes Anakin under his wing. He is very nurturing. Rather than simply being a master, Plo acts as a father to Anakin, helping raise him and shaping him into a sharp, young Jedi. Plo Koon frequently brings Anakin to Jedi Council meetings, with the young boy finding them incredibly boring, but he also helps Anakin learn about the inner dynamics of the Jedi leadership in its hierarchy. It allows for Anakin to learn the why behind many of the Council's decisions at a young age. Anakin, seeing and understanding this dynamic, develops a keen interest in the politics of the Order, and those of the galaxy at large. Due to their nature as protectors of the peace and mediators in galactic conflicts, the Jedi had incredible insights into the affairs of the Senate and the greater galaxy. Plo, seeing his young Padawan's keen eye for current affairs and shifting politics in the galaxy, brings Anakin to many of the diplomatic and political meetings that he is able to attend. Anakin meets the Chancellor many times as a teenager, and Palpatine watches Anakin's career with great interest. The pair always have productive conversations about life and politics and the galactic policy of the Chancellor's administration. While Palpatine tries to weasel his way into Anakin's life, he's not able to get as great of a foothold as he does in the main timeline. Plo is the father that Anakin never had, giving him wisdom and encouraging his interests from a young age. He's a figure that Anakin can trust, and Anakin is happy to have someone like Plo Koon, who's always got his back. There's no need for Anakin to confide in Palpatine outside of the arena of politics, no matter how hard Palpatine tries. As Anakin gets older, he learns to channel his negative emotions. Anakin also sees Plo as a figure that he can confide in, so he tells his master about his darker fears and inner feelings. Anakin speaks to Plo about his dreams of his mother, and Plo helps give him advice. Plo is empathetic, and he knows that many of the Jedi doctrines are difficult to actually maintain. Plo teaches Anakin about lightsaber combat, but he focuses more on the artistic side of saber training. Plo shows Anakin how to perfect the combat forms, and to how to actually turn his weapon into something that creates beauty and awe. Anakin uses this as a meditative technique, and rather than taking out his anger in sparring and on his fellow Padawans, he expresses it with this incredible flow state that he achieves in his forms and with his saber. Anakin even creates some of his own artistic forms outside of the main nine with the guidance of his master that are specifically intended for demonstration and meditation purposes. Anakin is very adept in combat sparring sessions with his peers. However, his saber is a fantastic outlet for him whenever he becomes frustrated with the way that things are going. It clears his mind, and Plo is happy that Anakin has found something to help him calm down. When it comes time for Anakin to make a lightsaber of his own, he ends up being called to a purple crystal in the caves on Ilum. Plo is a little bit surprised when he sees Anakin's completed saber, but only because of the color's rarity. Plo knows that Anakin struggles with darker feelings, but he also knows that the Padawan has learned to channel them into productive outlets. Perhaps one day, Anakin would even learn Vapad from Mace Windu himself. Plo gives Anakin plenty of downtime in his Padawan years that allow for him to converse with his peers and develop a solid support network within the Jedi Temple. As the events of Attack of the Clones begin to play out, Anakin spends much more time with Plo Koon in the Jedi Council meetings, and in the conversations with both Padme and the Chancellor. Because Anakin had been more politically engaged, he had met Padme many times in his years with Plo. He was incredibly enamored by her, and he had immense respect for her work in the Senate. Anakin had developed a small crush on her, but hadn't admitted it to anyone, including his master. Plo never brought it up with Anakin because he thought it was a little bit charming and cute. So when the conversations arrive as to who will protect Padme from these political attacks, Anakin instantly volunteers his services. Plo, who is busy with the affairs of the Council, is hesitant to advocate for this course of action. However, another Jedi who's a rising star in the Order, Obi-Wan Kenobi, says that he'll tag along with Anakin to offer mentorship, supervision, and to be a partner in the operation. The Council agrees to this, and so does Plo. He knows that Anakin and Obi-Wan have developed a good relationship in the training halls, and that Anakin and Obi-Wan had a relationship that was brotherly and solid. At first, Palpatine disagrees with this idea. He says that he thinks that one Jedi protector could be more discreet, especially a young Padawan like Anakin. He tries to manipulate the Council into giving into his demands and putting Anakin into a situation where he might have abandoned his Jedi values in order to pursue Padme. Plo argues heavily against the Chancellor's suggestion, knowing that Anakin secretly had feelings for the Senator, but not directly addressing it. Eventually, Palpatine concedes and the Council reaches an agreement with the office of the Supreme Chancellor, deciding that Padme would receive protection from Obi-Wan and Anakin. Once again, Obi-Wan and Anakin end up protecting Padme from Zam Weasel and the poison worms. They still pursue her through the city, and they end up finding Jango's Kaminoan dart that killed Zam. Obi-Wan still ends up going on a quest to find out about where that dart came from, and the Council tells Anakin to go with Padme as her protector on Naboo for as much time as necessary. Plo Koon, still having concerns about Anakin's feelings, keeps his mouth shut during the Council meetings. However, before Anakin departs with the Senator, Plo approaches him privately and confronts him about his worries. Anakin assures his master that everything will be fine, but he doesn't deny his feelings to Plo. He tells Plo that it's just a stupid crush that he had when he was younger, and that he's far more mature now than he used to be. Plo is still a little bit uneasy about the entire affair, so he tells Anakin to keep in contact with him and to remain accountable for his actions while he's gone. Anakin agrees, knowing that his master has the best intentions for him, and he departs with Padme to Naboo. The pair end up having a nice getaway together. Anakin feels himself trying to suppress his feelings, but he isn't able to. He talks with his master over hologram almost nightly, detailing his struggles with this desire. Plo reassures him that everything will be alright, and that Anakin is strong. Anakin and Padme discuss lots of politics, and Anakin gains a greater appreciation for the democracy that holds the galaxy together. He still appreciates the Chancellor and his many accomplishments, but Padme enlightens Anakin as to many of the criticism against his policies and his agenda. Anakin thanks her for these alternative perspectives. Since Anakin grew up around many politicians and smooth talkers, he develops a much better sense of social skills than he did as Obi-Wan's apprentice. Obi-Wan also discouraged Anakin's pursuit of feelings in the original timeline, whereas Plo was not nearly as constricting on Anakin's social life. So, Anakin learned to develop a little bit of a more flirtatious personality, and he occasionally uses this on the stay with Padme on Naboo. Instead of using the line, "I don't like sand," he actually gets a little bit more suave with the Senator. They end up sharing a kiss and start to develop deeper feelings for one another. Both of them, though, agree not to pursue anything for at least the time being. Anakin is a Jedi, and love was forbidden. Padme is a career senator, far too devoted to her career and her people to dive into a deep personal relationship with anyone at that time. Anakin feels too ashamed to tell Plo about the kiss, but he does confide in his master about the nightmares he's been having about his mother again. Plo feels empathy for Anakin, but he tells him that in order to further his connection with the Force, Anakin must learn to reject these emotions. So, Anakin meditates and he trains with his lightsaber art in order to distract himself and recenter himself in the flow of the Force. Anakin and Padme do not go to Tatooine, at least not yet. The pair still end up going after Obi-Wan on Geonosis because Padme convinces Anakin to go along with her on the mission, despite warnings from the Council and from Plo. Anakin is infatuated with Padme's courage and devotion to doing the right thing, qualities that he'd been taught Jedi should embrace. Their rescue attempt goes down much the same way as it did in Attack of the Clones. Anakin and Padme are captured in the droid factory and they're brought into the gladiatorial arena together by the Geonosians. The two still share an emotional kiss together, believing that this may be one of their last times seeing one another as they both fear death. Then, when they come out into the arena, Obi-Wan makes remarks about how great of a job they've done. The trio still battle with the arena beasts, and the Jedi come to save the day with the help of the clones. One thing that does change in this story is that when Padme falls out of the gunship, Anakin doesn't scream at Obi-Wan about how they needed to land and grab her. He senses that she's stable in the Force, and he stays true to their goal of catching Dooku. When Anakin and Obi-Wan take on Dooku in the hangar bay, the pair of them end up taking him on together. Anakin doesn't rush in because he's learned how to rein in his emotional brain. The pair manage to take on Dooku for a while, who toys with them for fun, until Yoda arrives. When Yoda comes, Dooku turns up the intensity and holds his own for a while. Soon after, however, he's subdued and captured by the three Jedi. Not even his incredible saber skills can match their power. They bring Dooku back to Coruscant and end up presenting him to the newly formed Republic military in order to face trial for conspiracy and treason against the Galactic Republic. When Palpatine hears of this development, his heart begins to race. Palpatine had been trying to groom Anakin with limited success, but he had no replacement for Dooku lined up. He also knew that if Dooku went before a Republic tribunal, he would reveal secrets about Palpatine to the entire galaxy. So, Palpatine tries to hatch a plan that would allow for his secret apprentice to escape and continue being the face of the separatist movement. He personally ends up wiring funds to some of the corrupt corporate senators, anonymously of course, that had separatist leanings and that he knows are in the Senate. And these untraceable funds come with a small message that simply says in all capital letters, "Free Dooku." These corporate figures, however, end up taking the completely wrong direction. The Corporate Council of the Confederacy of Independent Systems manages to convince the Separatist Parliament that the best way to free Dooku is to complete an all-out, immediate frontal assault on the capital world of the Republic directly. As this is all transpiring, Anakin continues to receive visions of his mother in his mind. He's shrouded in a dark aura, and Plo can sense it while the two are preparing for the Padawan trials after Dooku's charges. He asks Anakin what troubles him, and Anakin finally confides in Plo about what's going on to the full extent. He even starts to break down into tears. Plo knows that in most circumstances, meditation and recentering would be what he would suggest to the young Jedi. However, in this case, he knows that Anakin has a quest to undergo. He suggests to the Council that Anakin take a trip to Tatooine for his trial of the Spirit, and the Council agrees. They believe that this will be an opportunity to finally overcome some of Anakin's darker emotions, and for him to finally be molded into the Jedi that each of them know that he can be. So, Anakin travels to Tatooine on his own and goes under this journey of discovery. He finds Wada, who directs him to Klieg Lars. Anakin learns of his mother's death at the hands of Tuskens, and Klieg tells him to sit down. He tells Anakin that these Tuskens had killed his mother, and that Anakin had been too late to even see her one last time. However, Klieg tells Anakin that he knew Shmi had always been proud of him because of how often she talked about her son. The Larses were all familiar with his exploits as a boy, and they knew that she had been excited to see Anakin's journey. Anakin breaks down, broken by this revelation. Klieg tells him that he thought the Jedi weren't supposed to feel, to which Anakin responds that compassion is the greatest thing that a Jedi could have. Anakin had complete compassion for his mother and her plights. The Lars family says that he can stay with them as long as he needs to, so Anakin takes him up on their offer. He stays on their homestead, meditating and working on his lightsaber training. He also faces the more ugly parts of himself that had come out during the revelation of his mother's passing. Anakin knows that grief is natural, even for a Jedi. He also had some secret conversations with Padme over hologram, where he told her about some of his deeper feelings. Again, they never formally establish a romantic relationship, but they're definitely more than just friends, quote unquote. Anakin helps the Lars family with their tasks around the moisture vaporizer as well, trying to distract his mind from his mother and from Jedi training for just a few moments. Anakin actually learns to appreciate their simple lives. He distances himself from politics for a little while and simply looks inwards, reshaping the parts of him that were overshadowed by insecurity and trauma. Anakin's spiritual quest was going well for the couple of weeks that he's on Tatooine, but then he receives a dreadful holocall from Plo Koon, calling him back to Coruscant immediately. Hey folks, if you're enjoying this story, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications as we update this channel weekly with new What If content. Now, back to the story. Anakin bids farewell to his hosts, thanking them for their hospitality before hopping onto his transport ship and returning to Coruscant. He immediately lands at the Senate building where Plo Koon had told him to meet him. Anakin rushes past all of the officers and eventually finds his master standing with some of the other council members in the hallway of the Senate chambers, watching what's transpiring. Anakin asks what is going on, and Plo informs him that the Chancellor is giving a speech about some intelligence that he's received. Anakin tunes in, hearing the tail end of the conversation. He's shocked by what is revealed. Apparently, some of the clones stationed at the Republic prison had disobeyed orders and executed Count Dooku preemptively, just before he was supposed to go on trial. Furthermore, Palpatine also told the Senate about intelligence reported to his office regarding the incoming Separatist attack on Coruscant. He requested that during this crisis, his emergency powers be extended in order to allow a shift of decision-making towards regarding the actions taken by the clone army during this time of crisis. The Senate is up in arms and they vote immediately to extend the emergency powers of the Chancellor for an indefinite period of time. The Jedi seem to not be concerned by this course of action, but Anakin can't help but feel something off with the entire situation. Why had the clones, who were supposed to be bred from birth to follow orders, acted out of their own will and killed Dooku? And how had the Chancellor known so quickly about this incoming attack on Coruscant? After talking with Padme, Anakin had begun to see Palpatine's manipulation of the Senate to gain more and more power. Anakin knew that he had to pay Palpatine a visit. After speaking with Plo about his fears, his master advises Anakin to do what he feels the Force is leading him to do, especially since this might be part of his unique Jedi trials. So, Anakin goes to visit Palpatine. When Anakin enters his office, Palpatine is in a strategy meeting with some of his political and military advisors. Padme is there, along with Bail Organa, Wolf Yularen, and Wilhelm Tarkin. As soon as Anakin enters, Palpatine requests that all of his advisors leave the room and give the two some space. Anakin and Padme share a concerned look before she departs. Then, Anakin looks at Palpatine and begins to question him. Palpatine simply smiles. He then remarks that he's always seen potential in Anakin, and that he knew he could trust the young Jedi. Anakin asks what he meant, and Palpatine begins to explain everything. He tells Anakin his plans dating all the way back to Darth Plagueis, and explains that he killed Dooku in his cell so that he wouldn't be able to talk. Palpatine ensured that a couple of clone guards were present when he had done the deed, so that they would fire upon him and he could escape, having the defective clones to blame for the death of Dooku. He then told Anakin that this anonymous tip to his office had been none other than the rising Separatist star, Admiral Trench, who had contacted Palpatine's true form, Sidious, to inform him of the military intentions of the Confederacy. Since Dooku hadn't had time to recruit General Grievous into the service of the Separatists, Trench had assumed command of the military, and was the one who reported to Sidious after Dooku's capture. When Palpatine heard this, he saw an opportunity to capitalize and gain more power within the Republic. Palpatine knew that the Separatists were too deep into their invasion plans to just call them off, even though Dooku had died in prison. He also knew that with these shocking revelations, the Senate would surely vote to give him more executive powers in managing the conflict. While this had not been his original plan, he knew that he could adapt to the changing political conditions of galactic politics. Palpatine then turns to Anakin, looks deep into his eyes, and asks that Anakin join him in order to save the galaxy that they both loved. In that moment, the Separatist ships appeared in the skies over Coruscant, and their invasion began. As chaos rained down on the great metropolis, Palpatine calmly awaits Anakin's response. Anakin is conflicted, and Palpatine can feel that. He could sense Anakin's mournful soul, and he expresses that he can sense Anakin has lost someone. Palpatine says that if Anakin joins him, he can protect those he loves from death in the future. Anakin knows that joining Palpatine would be wrong, but he also acknowledges that this man had committed treason against the very Republic that they had sworn to protect. Anakin reaches for his lightsaber and ignites it, circling Palpatine. Palpatine smirks, saying that he can feel Anakin's conflict. The Chancellor even encourages the young Padawan to strike him down and let his true potential in the Force consume him. Anakin continues to hold his saber to the neck of the Chancellor, frozen by indecision. However, just as Anakin is about to make his move, he heard the sliding doors of the Chancellor's office open. Anakin turns his head and sees Plo Koon, Mace Windu, Yoda and Obi-Wan all standing at the entrance, their brows furrowed. Standing behind them is Padme, who looks incredibly confident and ready to kick some ass. Mace Windu demands to know what's going on. Anakin blurts that Palpatine is a Sith, and he had orchestrated this entire attack on Coruscant. The Chancellor had been Dooku's master, and now he was trying to recruit Anakin. Mace and his colleague ignite their sabers, saying that Palpatine was under arrest for his actions against the Republic. In the background, the skies of Coruscant are orange with explosions, and countless buildings are being reduced to rubble as the clones confront the droids on the ground. Starfighters and gunships flood the skies and engage in fast-paced dogfights, while Palpatine gazes upon his destruction and musters the infamous "It's treason then" line. He pulls his saber into his hand and backflips towards the Jedi, ready for a fight. Anakin and Padme watch in horror as the Chancellor takes on the 4 Jedi. Each of them is able to hold their own against the Sith Master, but Palpatine is incredibly adept in the dark side. Even Mace Windu, who uses a pod to channel the energy of the dark side opponents against them, seems to struggle against Palpatine's onslaught. Yoda bounces around Palpatine and uses his acrobatic prowess to distract the Sith. Obi-Wan, a master of defense, begins to crack with Palpatine's continued attacks and abilities. Almost immediately, Palpatine goes for Plo Koon, taking him off guard and stabbing him in the chest. Anakin cries out in rage, running towards the body of his master. Palpatine cackles as he continues to engage the other Jedi. Anakin stops and kneels beside Plo, who in his dying breath instructs Anakin to always remember the teachings of the Jedi and embrace the light. Plo dies in Anakin's arms, and Anakin feels himself engulfed with sadness. He cries out in pain, seeing the man that he had seen as a father pass away in the same month as his mother did. And this Sith, one of the men that he had once respected and trusted, had just been the one to bring this sorrow upon him. Anakin wouldn't let Palpatine do this to anyone else. He couldn't allow for this monster to hold power any longer after knowing his plans for the galaxy. Anakin rises from beside Plo's body and feels the power of his lightsaber pulse through his veins. He rises, and while Palpatine is distracted by the other 3 Jedi, he enters the battle and slices off Palpatine's dueling hand. Palpatine cries out in pain, but that quickly turns to a snarl of rage as he unleashes a wave of force lightning upon the 4 Jedi. Each of them is able to block the attack with their lightsabers, but because of its intensity, they feel their concentration breaking. Just as Anakin is about to give up, something unexpected happens. A stun blast comes from the corner of the room, impacting Palpatine during his fit of rage. The Force lightning stops, and Palpatine crumbles into a heap on the ground. Anakin turns, and he sees Padme standing by the entrance with her small Naboo pistol in her hands, and sporting a determined expression. Anakin feels his heart begin to race a little bit, partially because of their near death from Palpatine, and partially because Padme never looked so attracted to him as she did in that moment. Anakin collapses on the ground with exhaustion and pants heavily. The other Jedi glance at Padme and thank her for her warning about Palpatine's suspicious conduct. They also express gratitude for coming to their aid during a tense situation. As the battle for Coruscant rages on, Yoda contacts a clone battalion about the events that had transpired and calls for assistance in escorting Palpatine to jail. The clones enter, and the 4 Jedi recover. They all look out the window and see the battle raging outside, despaired that the actions of one man had led to the death of so many innocents. As the clones came, the Jedi help Anakin to his feet and leave the office. Padme does as well, and she stops by her own office to make a statement to the galaxy. She speaks eloquently, and she speaks openly. Padme lets the galaxy know exactly what had transpired in the Chancellor's office. And, as it turns out, she had placed a bug inside of his office right before Anakin entered. She had been suspecting the Chancellor had been corrupt for some time now, especially after he'd been given further emergency powers. But after he had somehow known about this attack on Coruscant out of the blue, Padme was certain. So, while she hadn't exactly engaged in the most ethical methods of procuring evidence, Padme had the entire conversation with Anakin recorded and ready to release when Palpatine's trial began. Padme released this video on the HoloNet, and it absolutely exploded. As the battle for Coruscant dies down, the Separatists eventually pull out. They had no purpose to continue this invasion anymore because of Dooku's death, and they could better place their resources elsewhere. Padme's video announcement makes waves, stirring up the incredible division within the Senate. With Palpatine under investigation, the Senate elects Lot Dod to be the Chancellor in Palpatine's place. They do this because he has a very neutral stance on this entire conspiracy, and he is seen to be a non-polarizing figure by senators in terms of this entire Palpatine scandal. Padme's actions are shamed by many Palpatine loyalists, but other senators applaud her. The Republic military holds her evidence in a secure server where it could not be tampered with, and Padme keeps a backup physical copy on her at all times, just in case something ever did happen to the secure files. Protests erupt across the galaxy of pro-Sheevers and anti-Sheevers, some of which end up getting violent. The Separatists, who are weakened by their foolish assault on Coruscant, take advantage of this time to recuperate and find a new figurehead for their movement. Anakin meets with the Council and he's promoted to Jedi Knight. He has clearly passed all of his trials in this encounter with Palpatine, and he displayed incredible loyalty to the Order. Anakin requests that he be posted far away from the central hub on Coruscant for some time that he can continue to recover from the death of his master and his mother. Given the extenuating circumstances, the Council permits this. Anakin decides to go to Jeddah in order to meditate and contemplate his relationship with the Force. He also wants to put some distance between himself and Padme for some time and rethink his attraction, maybe lose his feelings. The other Jedi act in much the same fashion as they did before, but they start to wonder how Palpatine could have slipped past their judgment for so many years. They decide to separate themselves from politics for a while and focus more on their connection with the Force. How do these events impact the end of our story? Well, let's find out. Eventually, Palpatine is charged with treason against the Republic. He is thrown into solitary confinement and is constantly monitored by guards around the clock. The Senate, under Lot Dod, becomes more military-oriented and focused on defending against the remaining Separatist forces. Little did the Senate know that Lot Dod was no less corrupt than Palpatine, and that he only wants to fuel the military-industrial complex that fuels his corporate profits. During this time, the Senate also votes to create more support networks for their clone soldiers, codifying their status into law as humans rather than just property. This ensures their loyalty, and it gives them certain rights that they didn't have before. Because of the deregulated trade routes and a booming war economy, the Republic has a significant amount of extra funds to actually begin paying their army a small paycheck, rather than just treating them like slaves. Padme remains a polarizing figure in the Senate, and many Sheev loyalists pester and try to have her humiliated at every turn. However, those who support her see her as a hero of the Republic. While small battles are incurred across the galaxy, major conflicts have been avoided with this arrest of Palpatine. The Separatists and the Republic eventually strike a deal that ends the war, but each of them continue to bolster their defense forces in anticipation of another possible conflict breaking out. This feeds the war profiteers more money, and corruption remains. At least there's peace in the galaxy, even if it's fragile. For the first time in a while, the politics had settled down, and the galaxy was in a state of Cold War between the Separatists and the Galactic Republic.